You guys good? Tell you what, it's already been a fabulous day, and it's a special day. Our in-residence days always are, and today is especially, I think it's going to be a powerful day for you. I'll talk more about our speaker here in a moment, but I want to just honor a few people. First of all, Dom, I don't know where she went, but great job. Wherever she is, right here, right front row, not surprised. It's an awesome job. So proud of you. I got a chance to meet Dawn before she even came at our Huntsville campus. She actually babysat my kids one night, which was, girl, I knew you were a leader at that point because that's a lot with all 4 boys. So just love you, proud of you. And I actually sent a video to Pastor Allen. He's like, we miss her up here in Huntsville. And so you're an incredible leader. One more time, can y'all honor Dawn? Great job. And then we also have just a bunch of our impact donors here today, all around here in this section. And I just want to take a moment on behalf of Pastor Chris and our entire student body, and thank you for investing in Highlands College. Your time, your gift, and honestly, even your support being here today, it means the world to us. We're truly honored to have you here. Come on, HC. Let's honor all of those who invested so much in HC. It's incredible. Now we have over 8,000 people who've come around Highlands College and invested in it, and it's a miracle story that we're building a college, and it's because of the love that God has put in everyone's heart for this generation, for you guys. It's just incredible. Got a couple of pastors here today I want to recognize. Pastor Steve Agalis from Destiny Worship Center down in Destin, Florida. It's a lot of D's right there. Honored to have you here. And we have Pastor Josh Joins, his wife Kara, who are here from Baytown, Texas. Honored to have you guys here. And of course, PC is in the house. Love you, PC. Well, today is just, again, a special day, and we have Andy Andrews here today, and he's here as our author in residence. He's written over 26 books. What I think is so incredible is that in those books, there are different genres. 4 different genres have been on the New York Times bestseller list. And that's just the beginning. He is our author in residence, but really there's so many titles we could have put on his leadership today because he's a leadership consultant. He's someone who has literally spoken into the armed forces, many different sports teams and corporations. I think Alabama being one of those, Nick Saban in Alabama. So some of you Roll Tide people, where y'all at? This is your moment. And so he speaks to different organizations and businesses and helps them fulfill their purpose. And take it to the next level. What's so incredible is when he gets involved with a company, oftentimes they double or triple their results year over year, just helping them learn a new way to think. And our first session this morning with the students, that's exactly the feedback I got from that session. It's just a new mentality, a new mindset that'll help you ultimately fulfill the call of God on your life. There's so many other things I could say about him, but I want to get out of the way. I want you guys to welcome our author in residence, Andy Andrews, to the stage.
It also kind of makes me nervous. Or let me just tell you what I think when I come out and people stand up. Let me just tell you what I think. I know it's very nice, but I also know that a bunch of you have no clue who I am. And so what I always think is when I first started getting on television, and one of the first times that I went through an airport and somebody recognized me and somebody else did and they wanted to take a picture, I went home and one of my best buddies was there, and I told him, I said, man, I went through the Atlanta airport today and 3 people stopped me and asked me to sign something, and they want to take their picture with me, and just pretty amazing. And Brent said, yeah. He said, you're probably going to get a lot of that in your life. He said, but I want you to always remember one thing when it happens. They do the same thing to the guy that wears the Donald Duck suit at Disney World. So he said, so every time you think you're a big deal, just kind of wiggle your tail like that. And so it occurs to me, when I come out and people stand up, you guys are awesome, and you're building such an awesome culture here. But I always have to remember, they teach you to do that. so it's nothing that I did. I am excited to be here with you today. And to kick off what I want to talk about in this session, I want to tell you about a conversation that I had with my oldest son. My wife and I have two boys. We have a 23-year-old, Austin, and a 20-year-old, Adam. And my 23-year-old was in the car with me, and he said, "Dad, what is the best advice you've ever gotten?" And I said, "Well, you know what? When you ask that, I know that a lot of people would say, well, you know, that's a good question, and I let me just think about that, because I've gotten some good advice through the years, and so why don't I get back with you on that this afternoon, because I need to think through that." And I said, "But I don't have to do that." I said, "Because I know right now the best advice I've ever gotten in my life." And it happened like 40 years ago, and the old man, when I was living under a pier and in and out of people's garages on a beach, and I met this old guy. The old guy, his name was Jones, and we didn't call him Mr. Jones, we just called him Jones. But he was the guy who gave me this advice. And how do you get to sit on the first row of two things in a row? You were on the first row of the thing we did there earlier, right? And I just, and I must apologize for my ADD, because it's real and it's present all the time. So anyway, I told Austin, the old man gave me this advice. I didn't really understand it at first, but now I use it with clients. I use it with friends, my family. I filter it through almost everything I'm deciding on a daily basis, and sometimes on an hourly basis. And he said, "Well, what was it?" I said, "Well, here it is. Very simple." He said, "You got to always remember, you can't believe everything you think." And I remember hearing that, and it just kind of going over my head, but it sounded kind of odd. So I kept unpacking it through the years. And let me tell you what I believe that means now, and how that has helped direct and change some of what I do. Here's the best way I can explain it. Have you ever known something? I mean, you knew it, and you could argue it, and you could win the argument every time. And then 6 months later, or like a year later, you found out, ooh, that was not exactly correct. Or you found, oh, my information was a little incomplete there. You ever done that? Okay, well, if you've ever done that in your life, does the possibility exist that something you know now, your information might be incomplete? And you would say, "Well, Andy, of course, something I know now, my information might be wrong or incomplete." Okay, I agree. But the point is, we don't really know what that is, do we? And we don't know how many subjects that may cover in your life. So there's a big world out there beyond what we think. This is why you can't believe everything you think. And see, here's the deal. The biggest danger we have to reaching our potential, I mean, God has a potential for all our lives, and the biggest, and you know, have you ever said, "God, just don't let me get in your way. Just don't let me screw it up." And so God has a potential, a mark for you, and the biggest danger we face in accomplishing or reaching our potential is not what we don't know. Because when we don't know something, we keep reading, we keep searching, we keep asking, we keep having conversations, we keep thinking about it. The biggest danger to reaching your potential is what you know for sure. Because that's when we stop. And I'll just add an addendum to that. The more successful somebody is in a given area, a given industry, the more successful somebody is, the more successful a company is, the more successful a ministry is, the more successful an organization is, the more likely they are to fall prey to that, because they're very successful and they look at their industry and they look side to side and nobody's doing better than they're doing, and they're kind of leading the way. And so it's real easy to come to the conclusion that you know it. And there's a lot of room beyond what you know for sure. One of the things that I find that really kind of digs into that is our preoccupation in our society with big things. You know, there's a great degree of talk about the big picture and getting the 30,000-foot view and making sure we have a big picture person that is leading, and a big picture person is what we need with this, and we need to have the big picture and to have the whole picture. And so there is a preoccupation with that ignores the fact that every big picture is made up of tiny little brushstrokes. You know, when Da Vinci was painting the Mona Lisa, he chose the smallest brush he had ever used. And you think about the time and the period in which they lived and the time he was using to do that. And his peers were like making fun of him, because it's like, dude, what are you doing? This is going to take forever. We got to sell something. You know, you're just taking forever on that. And he said, well, I'm creating a masterpiece. I mean, he intentionally went to create a masterpiece. And today, when you go to the Louvre and look at the Mona Lisa, even under a magnifying glass, you can't discern individual brushstrokes. And yet it was all done one little brushstroke at a time. And so the obvious truth there is that when your life is finished and whatever you are creating is done, whether what you created is a disaster or a masterpiece, either way, it will have been done one brushstroke at a time. So it's interesting to see the thinking that you have to do intentionally to dig to the bottom of the pool. You know, the bottom of the pool is a great metaphor to me for the truth. You know, when I was a little kid in Dothan, Alabama, at the Azalea Pool, I was like 11 years old, and my parents used to use the pool as a babysitter. And some of you guys that are as old as I am remember that. If you're a young person, nobody ever left you at the pool. But our parents left us at the pool. I mean, they would drop us off, and you know, you were 11, and you spent the summer at the pool. Curiously, that's what we called it, at the pool. You know, even though we spent most of our time in the pool, when somebody said, where were you? At the pool. And you could look and see somebody over the course of a summer that if their blonde hair didn't turn green, they didn't spend a lot of time at the pool, right? But we would play all the games that there was to play. We would play Marco Polo and atomic water ball and blue rover, which is just like red rover, but it's in the water. And we, by the middle of the summer, we would get tired of this, and we would start to create our own games. So one year we created a game that we called Dolphin. And the reason we called it Dolphin is because Flipper was on TV. Now, I am aware that there is a whole generation out here who probably doesn't know who Flipper was. Do you know who Lassie was? Okay, see, when we grew up, all the animal shows were the same. There was Lassie, there was Gentle Ben, there was Flicka, and they were all, it's like, and Flipper was a dolphin, and he was just one of those. It was like, Lassie, go help the boy. Go, Lassie, go. Gentle Ben, the boy's in trouble. Go, Ben, go. Flipper, they're drowning. Go, Flipper. And so, Flipper was just like Lassie in a wetsuit. It was kind of the same thing. And so the idea of our game, we were fascinated with how Flipper would come up on his tail and do that thing, where he'd come out of the water. We were just fascinated about it. So the subject or the object of our game was to get in the deep end, and we'd form a circle. And one at a time, we would go to the middle, and one at a time, you would see how far out of the water you could get. And that was our game, just how far out of the water. And we were like 11, but there was this one kid who was 12 years old. His name was Aaron Perry. And Aaron was older than us. He was bigger than us. He was taller than us. He had these huge hands. And this guy, he was massive. He was like 4'11". And he could palm a basketball in the third grade. He had big hands, big feet, and he always won. Always. He could get more water. And he always won. And it kind of got to be where you just kind of didn't want to play anymore because Aaron was always winning. And we had to make Aaron wait to the last most time because after Aaron went, kids wouldn't even take their turn. So he always won until the day my best friend just destroyed him. This was Kevin Perkins, and Kevin, Aaron had already gone, and so several kids had already left, and Kevin still had his. So he flew. He goes to the middle, and he turns around. And we're treading water, and he's treading water. And he says, "Y'all ready?" And we're like, "Yes, we're ready to go." He said, "Are you sure you're ready?" We're like, "Yes, we're ready. Go." And so instead of going up, he went down. And we're treading water trying to look and see what he's doing. And before we can even ask each other, he goes all the way to the bottom, and then he squats way down. And then all of a sudden he pushes off the bottom. He comes rocketing out of the water, and we're like, ah! He's like way higher than Aaron has ever gone. We got a new dolphin champion. It's like, and of course, right away, Aaron and his little toadies are going, you cheated. That's not how you play the game. You cheated. And Kevin's like, really? Where's the rule that says that you can't go down before you go up? And we're like splashing that chlorine water in Aaron's face. Go, yeah, where's that rule, huh? Where's that rule? And so, unfortunately, the Dolphin Rules Committee, which was Aaron's mother, she said that now this was legal for all participants. And, of course, Aaron began winning again immediately. And Aaron won until we quit playing. But so Aaron was the Dolphin champion. But to this day, Kevin is like the Dolphin legend to us. Kevin, he's Uncle Kevin and my boys. And he comes over to our house, and my boys, they're 20, 30, 20. Uncle Kevin, tell us about Dolphin. And Kevin said, well, there it was, right in the middle. And then went down, and then we got splashing water. And we're telling the story. It never gets old, It never gets old. But something had always bothered me about that story. And I couldn't put my finger on what it was that was bugging me. And then I realized one day, I thought, even though we were the only place playing dolphin because we invented the game. You could make the argument that we were the best dolphin players in the world. And you could make the argument that Aaron was the best of the best. He was the best on the planet. And if you had come to us when we were so frustrated and Aaron was winning everything, if you had come to us and said, guys, come on, try harder. And we would have said, we're doing the best we can. We're trying, because we would watch him. We would study him. Is he folding his thumb in? Is he like folding it out? Is it beside? Does he cup his hands? Or his feet when he kicks? Does he do like this, or does he do one like this? And we were trying to, but as we would get better, Aaron would get better. And so, even though we were doing the best we could, there was a mark out there that we did not realize was available. And so if there's something out there that you don't know you can gun for, rarely do we gun for it. I mean, if we have gotten to the thing where we believe in everything we think we're the best, and but while we were doing the best we could do, the mark that we were ignoring was there was a best that could be done. And thinking to figure how you go from the best you can do to increase your performance to the best that could be done, it's a thinking thing. Because when we were doing the best we could do, we had studied Aaron. I mean, we knew how to do it. We knew how the game was played. It was obvious how the game was played. At least it was obvious until one kid went down instead of up. Then what had been so obvious was no longer even the truth. To me, the bottom of the pool is a metaphor for the truth. That's as deep as you can go. Things can be true and not be the truth. In the first session we did, and I'll tell you this very quickly, it's a concept people have a hard time getting around. But when I explain this, you will start seeing this everywhere. This will elevate your thinking past what is true, because we tend to stop at what is true. And why do we stop at what is true? Because, the best companies, the best organizations, they tend to stop at what is true. Why? Because it's producing. It's working. Nobody's doing better than we are. And it's working. It's true. But the truth is the bottom of the pool. It's the foundation. Until you get to that foundation and plant your feet against that solid ground, you could never harness all the power that's available. You're just pushing against water. So here's an example of true versus truth. If we took a blind person and said, hey, we're going to introduce you to an animal you've never heard of, you've never spent any time with, and it's called an elephant, and we got one in a barn here, and we'll just do a little test here. We'd like you to go in, spend some time with this elephant, and you can touch it, you can pet it, you can feel around it, and after you decide you have enough information, if you would come and tell us what an elephant is like and how it could be used by society. Okay, so the blind person goes in, and after 10, 15, 20 minutes, he comes out and he says, okay, an elephant is very tall, very wide, very wide, big, very big, tall, wide, kind of flat, very dense. And you could probably use an elephant for a gate. You probably get a bunch of them and make a wall. And we would listen to that and say, thank you, that's very good. That is true. It's true. Not the truth. Because until we got to the truth about an elephant, we would never have any idea what one really looked like. And we'd never have any idea the many ways it could be used. But it was true. And we're fine to stop there. So, going to the bottom of the pool, finding the truth in a certain thing is important if your potential is the best. If you're wanting to accomplish the best, because the best, they're like the truth, because the best is one thing. I mean, we're not talking about among the best or some of the best or the best of the decade. We said the best. So the best, that's one thing. Now, there can be different categories, but in every category, the best is one thing. It's like the truth. The bottom of the pool, the truth, that's it. That's one thing. And it's curious that you can find the truth and do nothing with it or just admire it, or you can find the truth and you still probably won't accomplish the best. But if you're determined to accomplish the best, you will never do it without the truth. That requires the truth. And so the truth is often a very little thing. What is true is most times very obvious. This is why we're tempted to stop there. When I was about 23 years old. I was still under the pier, but getting out. And Kevin Perkins again. Kevin had his dad's boat. And, you know, I thought for a long time you would never see anybody that liked to fish as much as I like to fish. Kevin Perkins and I, we just like were ate up with it. But then I have my son, Adam. And Adam's 20 years old, and Adam unbelievably likes to fish way more than I ever liked to fish, and he's better at it. Adam has a business. He takes people shark fishing from the beach. You know, kayaks, baits out, and tags and releases like big sharks, like 12-foot tiger sharks, 1,000-pound fish, and they tag them and release them, and so you know, he's a better fisherman than I. But at the time, and I'm under the pier, and Kevin would come down sometimes on the weekend, and he would ride me around and pay for my meals, and we would go fish, and he would let me sell all the fish. That was a great friend, right? And to this day, Kevin's my best buddy, and I swore if I ever was able to, Kevin was never going to buy me another meal. And so for 30 years or so, I've been buying lunch. But this day, we were headed out. We had heard the tuna were just eating the pilings off the rigs. And so there are oil rigs that are, some you can see from shore, but the deep water rigs are way off. There's one called the Ram Powell that is such a huge rig that it takes Exxon and Shell together to do this, to work this rig. It's in about 4,000 feet of water, and it's 80 miles offshore. And so that was just within our range, just within the range of the boat with the fuel. And so we gassed up and we started heading out. We would go out in the afternoon, so we'd get there and fish at night and then come back in the next morning. And so we got to going, got out of the pass, and put on the autopilot, which people think the autopilot is so that you can just sit back and do nothing. Autopilots were built to save fuel, because a straight path is less fuel than doing this, right? And so against the waves, it'll take you different. But you can't just not look, because you might run over a log or something. And so you set it, but you're keeping an eye out. And so after a while, we had this thing set, and we looked back at Orange Beach, and it was still there. And then we looked back again in like 20 minutes, and you're seeing the tops of the condos. And when we left sight of land, it's at about, that's about 10 miles, depending on how big the buildings are, because the horizon just on a flat sea is at about 7 miles. You see to the horizon. And so as we were used to approaching this rig, you'd see it just kind of coming up, rising up out of the water. And we dead on. But as we went on and on and on, we realized, shouldn't we be seeing the rig by now? And I'm seeing Kevin look at his watch and look at the fuel, and we ask again, shouldn't we see this by now? And now it's getting dark, and we realize we're supposed to be there. And we hadn't even seen it. And then it gets dark. And now we're looking around, because this rig is like 8 or 9 stories high, and it's lit up like God's last bonfire. And so you can't miss it. And yet we apparently had, because we were thinking, had they moved it? They wouldn't have moved it, would they? No, we had missed it. And so now we knew we got to turn around, because we don't know how much we've missed it by. And we had just enough fuel to get there, cut the motors off, drift, and then crank them up and come back. And we don't know how much we have missed this mark by. So we got to turn around, because the last thing we need to do is run out of fuel out of sight of land in the dark. But that's what we did. And we floated out there until daylight. And when daylight came, we were actually just within sight of land. We could see the tops of the condos. And somebody with their binoculars had seen us floating out there and sent the Coast Guard. And so we got towed back in. And it was awful. But we didn't know what had happened. And so Kevin's dad took the autopilot in to have it checked, and that's what it was. The autopilot was 2 degrees off. I mean, there's 360 degrees on a compass, an internal compass with the autopilot. And 2 degrees off, when we were leaving land and looking back at Orange Beach, everything seemed to be where it always was. But when you go 80 miles and you're 2 degrees off, it's a big difference. It's a miss. It's over the horizon from you. So here's what I learned from that. I learned that a little bitty shift makes a big difference. And if a little bitty shift can make a big difference at the end, then that means the shift has to be made at the beginning. And a lot of times when people want a change in their lives, they want a change in their relationships, they want a change in their results, they're discouraged right off the bat because they think, I'm so far off base. There's so much change that I've got to do. I don't even know if we even start this. But to realize that that difference at the end of the journey is made by a minute shift at the beginning. You don't have to make a massive, massive change. These little things make such a huge difference. You know, at the Beijing Olympics, Michael Phelps won 8 gold medals. Remember that? And Speedo, his sponsor, he was breaking Mark Spitz's record. Mark Spitz had 7 gold medals, also in swimming. And so Speedo offered Michael Phelps $1 million check if he had 8. And if you remember, he got 8. But what you may not remember is the 8th gold medal he won by 1/100th of a second. Now, 1/100th of a second is faster than a lightning bolt. 1/100th of a second is faster than the blink of an eye. It's less time than it takes for a hummingbird to flap its wings once. 1/100th of a second. Now, science has decided that thought has mass. Okay? If it does, then where did that 1/100th of a second come from? I mean, really? Did it come from 1 extra cup of coffee that morning? Did it come from 10 minutes more rest the week before? Or did it come from a thought or the absence of a thought? Because I would bet that if somewhere in the middle of that race, Michael Phelps, if somewhere in the middle of that race he thought, this is not going well, I'll bet you anything that would have taken 2/100ths of a second. And so what makes the difference when we're looking to meet God's potential and we're wanting to accomplish it? Should we keep our eyes on huge things, or should we reduce what we're looking at to something manageable, to something if God sees every sparrow when it falls, that's certainly a little thing. And so God's example to us is to pay attention to the little things, to think beyond what we think, to think beyond what we know to be true. And I have found that results can be doubled and tripled by paying attention to thinking about little things. Have you ever heard of the butterfly effect? The butterfly effect was a doctoral thesis written in 1963 by Edward Lorenz. And it was literally laughed out of the New York Academy of Sciences because it was ridiculous. The butterfly effect stated a butterfly could flap its wings on one side of the planet and set molecules of air in motion that moved other molecules of air that somewhere along the line would move other molecules of air, then somewhere could actually create or change weather patterns on the other side of the world. The butterfly effect. It was ridiculous, but it was interesting. And because it was so interesting, it hung around in myth and urban legend and comic books and bad movies until finally, in the mid-90s, professors at universities all across the world working together, these physics guys, proved the butterfly effect was accurate and viable, and it worked every time. And not just with butterflies. It worked with any form of moving matter, including people. And they gave it the status of a law. Today, just like the law of gravity, the butterfly effect is known in scientific circles as the law of sensitive dependence upon initial conditions. And it works every time. Now here's, you think, well, how does that work in the real world? Because it's such a little thing that most people don't know about it and certainly don't know how it works and certainly are not aware that it's working in their lives. And so how does this work in the real world? Okay, I'll give you an example. A number of years ago, I had just gone into a hotel room and I was going to speak to a bunch of people, and the television was on. I wasn't paying attention. You know, you go in a hotel room, they have the TV on. For some reason, that drives me crazy. But I didn't even have time to turn the TV off. I grabbed the ironing board. I was ironing the left sleeve of a white shirt. And it was a Friday night. I know it was a Friday night because ABC News was on the television, and they were doing this Person of the Week thing. And for years, they still do this. Every Friday night, ABC News talks about somebody and how great they were and what they did, and they give them the Person of the Week award. And so I'm just barely listening. And so this anchor guy says, and so the Person of the Week for, and he gave the date, he said, is Norman Borlaug. And man, when he said Norman Borlaug, I put the iron down. I ran over in front of the television. My jaw was around my knees. I'm thinking, I know who this is. I didn't know the dude was still alive. I mean, he was 91 years old at the time. And like a couple of years later, he died in Dallas. But I knew who he was because I had written this book. And while I'm researching this book, I had gone down a rabbit trail, pulled a thread, gone down another. And I found this guy, Norman Borlaug, who in the 30s and 40s, he had hybridized corn and wheat for arid climates. And they had determined that his work across the world through the decades, they calculated that his work had saved the lives from famine of over 2 billion people. The guy saved 2 billion lives. And for that, he was Person of the Week. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like yelling at the TV because I know it wasn't Norman Borlaug who was responsible for saving the 2 billion people. It was a guy named Henry Wallace. They'd never said anything about Henry Wallace. But Henry Wallace was the vice president of the United States under Roosevelt. Now, a lot of people think, wait a minute, what about Truman? Well, Truman too. But remember, Roosevelt was elected 4 times. And curiously, he had 3 different vice presidents. The last one was Truman, but the middle one was the former Secretary of Agriculture, a man named Henry Wallace, who, while he was Vice President of the United States, used the power of that office to create a station in Mexico whose sole purpose was to figure out how to hybridize corn and wheat for arid climates. And he hired a young man named Norman Borlaug to run it. And Norman Borlaug got the Nobel Prize. And Norman Borlaug got Person of the Week. But when you think about it, it was really Henry Wallace who saved the 2 billion people. Unless it would have been George Washington Carver. You remember Carver, don't you? The peanut stuff? See, here's something that people don't know about Carver. When he was 19 years old and a student at Iowa State University, he had a dairy sciences professor who on Saturday and Sunday afternoons would allow his 6-year-old boy to go on botanical expeditions with this brilliant student. I mean, George Washington Carver was basically his babysitter, okay? But it was George Washington Carver who took this 6-year-old and pointed his life in a direction. It was George Washington Carver who took this 6-year-old Henry Wallace, long before he ever thought about being vice president of the United States, and put a vision in his life about plants and what they could do for humanity. And it's amazing to think of George Washington Carver flapping his butterfly wings all those years with the peanut. 266 things he developed from the peanut that we still use today. He flapped his butterfly wings for years with the sweet potato. 88 things he developed from the sweet potato that we still use today. And while nobody was even looking, he took a couple of weekends and flapped his wings with a 6-year-old and just happened to save the lives of 2 billion people. So when you think about it, maybe Carver should have been Person of the Week. Unless it would have been the farmer from Diamond, Missouri. His name was Moses. He lived in a slave state, but he didn't believe in slavery. So this was a problem for these psychopaths like Quantrill's raiders, who would come through farms and villages burning and destroying. And one January night, Quantrill's raiders came through Moses' farm, and they burned the barn, they shot several people, and they drug off a lady named Mary Washington, who refused to let go of her infant son, George. Now, Moses was kind of ADD and crazy and disorganized like me, I guess, but he had a wife named Susan who was very organized. And Susan immediately sent messages out and messengers out, trying desperately to create a meeting with Quantrill's raiders to try to get Mary and that baby back. And in 48 hours, she had this meeting set. And she sent her husband several hours north to a crossroads in Kansas on a black horse, where at the appointed time, he met 4 of Quantrill's raiders who showed up on horseback, carrying torches, the flour sacks over their head with eye holes cut out. And there he traded the last horse he had left on that farm for what they threw him in a burlap sack. And as he caught it and went to the ground, and they thundered off, horses, he's left alone in the dark with his breath coming out against that black night. He pulled out of that burlap sack a cold, naked, almost dead baby boy. And he jerked open his coat and his shirts and put the baby in next to his skin and covered him up. And he walked that baby out and all the way home. And the next afternoon, we stumbled through the front door and put the baby in the arms of his wife. They went to the fireplace, put the baby on a blanket, and began to massage his arms and his legs to try to get him to cry, just get his circulation going, something. And they prayed over that baby. And they told God that if you will let this baby live, we will raise him as our own. And they promised that baby that they would educate him to honor his mother, who they knew was already dead. And that was the moment they gave that baby their name. And that's how Moses and Susan Carver came to raise that little baby, George Washington. So when you think about it, it's really a farmer's wife from Diamond, Missouri, that saved 2 billion people. Unless, I mean, we could do this all day. I mean, how far back could we go, right? How far back could we go to show whose move at what time really was the move that saved 2 billion people, a number that continues to increase as we sit here. How far back could we go? And how far forward could we go in your life? How far forward could we go to show the difference you will make by the actions you take or don't take? You get it, right? There's generations yet unborn whose very lives will be shifted and shaped by what you do this afternoon and tonight and tomorrow and the next day and the next, because everything you do matters. Not just to you or your family or Highlands College or your hometown. Everything you do matters to all of us and for all time. Because everything you do matters. Bow your heads. Lord, thank you for this time with these people. Thank you for their lives. Lord, I would ask that you would allow them to think in a deeper way. Allow them to consider your word in a deeper way. And to consider their witness in a deeper way. Father, help them understand things that you want your people to understand. That if they did understand, they would live the lives you want them to live. Which means they would have a relationship with you. Which means they wouldn't need to go to the government or to Oprah, or they would come to you. And Lord, as these people think to the bottom of the pool, give them simple ways to explain complicated things that are confusing the people who need to know you. Bless our efforts, Lord. Bless the school and the leaders. Amen.
Come on, everybody. Help me thank Andy. Thank you so much. Thank you. Come on, you can do better than that. Thank you so much. Thank you. Hey, and while you're standing, help me thank once again our guests here, our impact donors, the pastors that are here. Thank you so much for being here. And one more time, thank my pastor, Dom. Thank you so much for your message today as well. So good. Y'all, today's gonna be a great day. We have an opportunity for you to meet Andy Andrews later today at 12:45, okay? Right before prac on the communication stairs. Be sure to meet him, take a picture with him. Don't miss that moment. Also, next week is a great week. We've got chapel with Onika McClellan. We've got, Pastor Rich Wilkerson coming on Thursday. Preview day Thursday. And so because with all the guests that we have, the team that we get to share this space with, make sure that we are creating room and space for them in parking, okay? So students, we get the privilege and opportunity to park on the 4th and 5th floor, okay? So make sure that you're parking on those levels and reserve the rest for our guests and the team that works here throughout the rest of the week. Sound good? All right, everybody enjoy your day. It's gonna be a great day, and see you at 12:45 on the communication stairs.